Today's video is brought to you by Flexispot. Dragons, gold, sickness. Put together a deadly combination. Hello and welcome to The Broken Sword. Today we are looking at what is dragon sickness.
Build me an army worthy of Mordor.
And Smaug laughed aloud. He had a wicked and wily heart, and he knew his guesses were not far out, though he suspected that the lake men were at the back of the plans, and that most of the plunder was meant to stop there in the town by the shore that in his young days had been called Esgaroth. One thing we know for sure about dragons is that they like to hoard gold. And during The Hobbit, we see Thorin Oakenshield suffer from dragon sickness. He becomes greedier and more selfish and unwilling to help those who brought down the deadly dragon, Smaug.
A sickness lies upon that treasure.
Ambition of a mountain king.
This feeling, this change, this illness, it all comes from the dragons of Middle-earth. These beasts of creatures were extremely greedy beings, who always wished for more and more treasure that they could just hoard and keep a guard of. We see the famous case of this in The Hobbit. Smaug became aware of the growing and immense wealth that the dwarves under the mountain in Erebor had grown for themselves. So, one day, this fire drake from the north came and descended on the city, raining down fire and destruction in an event that became known as the Sack of the Lonely Mountain. The dwarves who lived here had to run and leave their treasure behind, so Smaug claimed it all for himself, gathered it all in the Great Hall of Erebor, and dwelt there for what would end up being the next 171 years. Which, at that point, is when we catch up with the story of The Hobbit. And as we know from that, he met his end at the hands of Bard the Bowman of Laketown.
Hi guys, we are just pausing this video here for one moment to talk to you about our sponsor for today, Flexispot. Now, they have been awesome enough to send me a standing desk because, you know, sometimes sitting down all day doing these videos for you can be hard work. So I thought, let's put it together on camera and I'll tell you a bit about it.
The company are really trying to push a healthier work lifestyle. So if you want a refreshed home office work desk, they are definitely the way to go. It was very simple to set up. There are a wide variety of sizes and colours available too, and each of these have a great range of heights that you can work from. So, if you're a hobbit, like me, or an ent, you won't have any issues working with it. If you like the look of what you see and you are thinking about getting one, trust me, you won't regret going with Flexispot. They even have a sale going on right now, and add that to their worldwide shipping, fly to their website, and do not be a fool. Link, of course, will be in the description below. Now, as for dragon sickness, if we rewind slightly, while Smaug stayed within Erebor amongst the treasure, the gold that he lay on became infected with what would be known as this dragon sickness. This sickness would only affect those that came into contact with the treasure, usually from a more prolonged period, and it would taint the mind of whoever that may be. It could affect some more than others though, as we see from how Thorin became more affected than the others of his party, especially Bilbo Baggins, the Hobbit. One thing I do need to add here though is that this entire issue of dragon sickness with Thorin is a Peter Jackson addition. He does not suffer from this in the books. In fact, none of Thorin's company does. Thorin's issues in the book come from, as Gandalf says in the writings after his passing, how
Thorin did not live to enjoy his triumph or his treasure. Pride and greed overcame him in spite of my warning.
So really, Peter Jackson took these personality traits and emphasized them as an illness caused by a dragon, rather than being more the core of the character of Thorin himself. That does not mean it was completely invented by him though. As if we do go back to the book itself for a moment, after the events of the Battle of the Five Armies, the Master of Laketown receives a portion of the treasure so that they can rebuild Laketown after its destruction. This affects this man more than most though, and as it says in The Hobbit, the old master had come to a bad end. Bard had given him much gold for the help of the lake people, but being of the kind that easily catches such disease, he fell under the dragon sickness, and took most of the gold and fled with it, and died of starvation in the waste, deserted by his companions. And just to quickly add to this quote, for those of you who are not sure, the waste that is said in the quote is never really specified, but it is assumed that it is the area of land north of the Lonely Mountain. This was considered as an uninhabited region, so it is hard to even know what the Master would have hoped to achieve by going here, apart from really being alone. But that is what the sickness could do to people. It was almost like it turned his mind closer to that of a dragon's, to just hope to hoard the treasure and nothing more. Although some consider the events of The Hobbit to be the first case of dragon sickness we see in Tolkien's work, this is potentially not in fact true, as there was a lord of the Eotheod, Fram, son of Frumgar. He is believed to be the 5th lord of the Eotheod, who ruled somewhere around the late 20th and early 21st centuries of the Third Age. The details of this rule were never actually noted in greater detail by Tolkien. However, what we do know is that he had lived near the Grey Mountains and was most famous for having killed the dragon Scatha the Worm, with Tolkien often using the name Worm as a nickname for his dragons. After Fram killed this dragon, he had claimed its hoard for his own, but the dwarves of the Grey Mountains also claimed the treasure as it had been stolen from them in the first place. However, Fram, just like Thorin did later, refused to share even a single gold piece of his hoard. In fact, Fram sent the dwarves the dragon's teeth with the message: "Jewels such as these you will not match in your treasuries, for they are hard to come by." This mocking just ended up angering the dwarves, and it is believed that this is where Fram would meet his fate, with the dwarves killing him for his insult. Now, it is never confirmed that this is dragon sickness, but with the Master being the only written confirmation of this illness, these events could be considered fairly similar. Although, Fram could also have just been more like Thorin in the books, where it was more the pride and greed of this person that he always possessed is what really caused the problems. It is an interesting one how Peter Jackson really played on this idea of dragon sickness, how he made it play a major role in the final edition of the Hobbit trilogy. Thorin becomes overwhelmingly obsessed with the wealth of the recovered treasure, with ever-increasing paranoia, and this became so strong it was at the point of letting all his kin from the Iron Hills die, who had really just come to help him out after he became besieged, as well as even threatening to throw Bilbo off the wall for his part in taking the Arkenstone. This comes across as a more extreme version than described in the books, obviously for higher dramatic tension on the screen, as it gives him a stronger redemption arc later on, as well as meaning he could use more of Thorin's more dislikable qualities from the book, but make it appear as though it was not his fault that he acted in those ways. This is just one example of one of the many things that were altered, even slightly, for the movie adaptations just to make them fit better for an on-screen version in the story that Peter Jackson was telling. So really, there we have it. As we can see from these examples, a basic summary of what evidence we could find of dragon sickness, and what it did to people who suffered from it. It is a sickness of selfishness, greed, and irrational behaviour that gets amplified with treasures that have been hoarded over periods of time by dragons, that then affects the next being who would go on to claim that treasure. And the word amplify does play a big part in this. For example, with the dwarven race, at least in general, they already suffered from the trait of greed for treasure, so that means this would affect them more than others, whereas someone like the Hobbit Bilbo Baggins was never really that way inclined, so even amplified would not have affected him to the same degree. But obviously, at the end of the day, it still comes down to each being as an individual, and from Tolkien himself, we never get much of a description on it, so this is trying to just work things out from the little that we know. And that is where I will wind down this video for today on dragon sickness. And that brings me to my question for you all, and that is, who is your favourite of the dragons of Middle-earth? We have the likes of Smaug and Scatha that we mentioned today, as well as the likes of Glaurung and Ancalagon the Black from earlier years, as well as other more obscure ones too. Do you have a favourite? Please let me know your thoughts and reasons why in the comment section below. And now, firstly, to quickly mention our other channels, which will of course be linked in the description below, and also to shout out our patrons. Firstly, we have our Divine Power tier members of Kevin and Abram. You are both awesome. And a big thanks to our Fire Demon tier members, Nashith, Denver Steele, and Gregory. And as well, I cannot forget the Wizard Staff tier members of John, Andrew, and Jennifer as well. Every single one of you is a true legend of the Brohim. Finally, if you have managed to reach the end of the video with me today and you've enjoyed what you've seen, then please do the great stuff. Hit the like button on the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon so that you can be notified of all future uploads. All these things massively help us out. And also remember too to check out Flexispot for all your standing desk needs. So thank you once again if you have managed to reach the very end of this video with me today, and I will see you next time on The Broken Sword.